I like Rosemary Traumer's unusual spin on being grateful in the moment. Translation by Rosemary Traumer. Once I would say table and mean table. Once I would say broccoli and mean broccoli. I would say stone and mean stone. I really did believe that things were separate and nameable. Now, every word that comes out of my mouth, no matter how many syllables, no matter the tone of voice, no matter my intention, I've come to understand that every word is really just a translation for thank you. Thank you for this moment. And every silence between the words, regardless of how brief, is really just the sound of one hand in gratitude clapping.
The poetry service is a tradition here at UUI. When it started, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. We are here in this place to hear poems. Poetry in church isn't new. The Psalms were poems. Even my mother, who claims no religion, loves the 23rd Psalm. Yea, though I walk through the valley, the words are beautiful. Our poetry services have a theme, but poetry themes are difficult. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow, rings different bells in my head, I know, than in my mother's. My grandmother, who fled the Cossacks, who on her richest of days made soup with chicken backs, hears a different ring from the words, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. My mom and dad made sure the bells would ring differently for me. Jamie's not here. He told us, do what you want. Spring is coming. The world is refreshed. Things are growing. Change is in the air. Mike and I said we would try. So spring it is. But Mike's bells ring differently from mine. His bells ring their own song. His bells ring with a mallet forged in the fires of his life. We only hope your bells will ring and that our bells together will make a pleasing sound. So sit back, relax, enjoy, or strain to hear the meaning in each word. Do whatever you do. But whatever you do, you need fear no evil, for it's poetry, just poetry. I want to call up Polion Lotvit today to read our first poem.
Hi, this is Puyan Lotvit. The first poem is by Mark Nepo, Understanding Leaves. The leaves do what we can't. They wait their whole lives. At first, they dream of air and wait to slip from wood. Then, they dream of openness and wait to stretch in light. Then, they dream of thirst and wait to soften in the rain. At last, they dream of nothing and simply unfurl. Photosynthesis is how this waiting is described in the physical world. The mystery of waiting is what turns light into food. To wait beyond what we think we can bear is how things within turn sweet.
Two years back, my family and I were traipsing through the redwoods in Northern California. We were overwhelmed with their magnificence. my youngest daughter urged a redwood poetry slam on the family. This was my contribution, called First Person Present. I am a sentinel among sentinels. 50 of you standing foot on shoulder fall short of my crest. Where I stand, I see miles and miles of undergrowth. Your canopy, I am a stilt to the sky, holding more than a candle to Jack's beans. Needled to life by dew and the rooted moisture far below, you drowned in my presence, trying to fathom the unfathomable, imagine the unimaginable, frame the unframeable. 20 centurions fall short of my years. I am an unnamed wonder of the world, unfettered by wind, fire, and drought. All I fear is you. When you remember me, think of me as your Northwest Grand Canyon, your hoodoos from Bryce. I am your pyramid, cathedral, and skyscraper, made without lifting a hand. Emily Dickinson needs little introduction. Known for her spare language that packs more than a single nugget of truth in a poem, she's another poet I encountered early in my school years and routinely go back to her old standbys for comfort and perspective. This is a poem called A Light Exists in Spring. A light exists in spring, not present on the year at any other period. When March is scarcely here, a color stands abroad on solitary fields that science cannot overtake, but human nature feels. It waits upon the lawn, it shows the furthest tree upon the furthest slope. You know, it almost speaks to you. Then as horizons step or noons report away, without the formula of sound, it passes and we stay. A quality of loss affecting our content as trade had suddenly encroached upon a sacrament. When I was a high school sophomore, Father Murray Bodo began to teach me the love of good poetry. This poem and E. E. Cummings were part of that baptism, brought to us on that smelly, damp, mimeographed paper of old. It's called an Unjust. Unjust spring, when the world is mud luscious, the little lame balloon man whistles far and wee. And Eddie and Bill come running from marbles and piracies, and it's spring, when the world is puddle wonderful, the queer old balloon man whistles far and wee. And Betty and Isabel come dancing from hopscotch and jump rope, and it's spring, and the goat-footed balloon man whistles far and wee.
I've done a few of these poetry services, and the way you look for poems these days changes with the internet. I still read poetry books, but it's easy to go online and find poems now. And I found a bunch of sort of weird, depressing spring poems. So I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to apologize up front, but I apologize up front for these depressing spring poems. The other thing that you can find online, which is interesting, and Jay Harvey, who used to do this service with us, didn't like reviews of poetry, kind of let people make their own judgments, but you can find all these reviews and the meaning of the poetry online. And this first poem by William Carlos Williams had an awful lot of analysis. I picked it because its name is By the Road to the Contagious Hospital, which seemed appropriate. After I read it, I couldn't really figure out where the Contagious Hospital came to play in this, so I started reading all of the analysis of the poem, and I'm not going to tell you any of that. You can make your own judgments, but there was sort of an anonymous Professor Z who said this sort of at the end of all the analysis in a place where people could make their own comments on this little website. He said something to the effect of, it seems in this day and age we overanalyze everything. Just let the poem talk. It's a simple thing. So here it is, By the Road to the Contagious Hospital by William Carlos Williams. I, by the road to the contagious hospital, under the surge of the blue mottled clouds driven from the northeast, a cold wind, beyond the waste of broad muddy fields, brown with dried weeds standing and fallen, patches of standing water, the scattered of tall trees, all along the road, the reddish, purplish, forked, upstanding, twiggy stuff of brushes and small trees with dead brown leaves under them, leafless vines, lifeless in appearance, sluggish, dazed, spring approaches. They enter the new world naked, cold, uncertain of all, save that they enter. All about them, the cold, familiar wind. Now the grass. Tomorrow, the stiff curl of wild carrot leaf. One by one, objects are defined. It quickens. Clarity, outline of the leaf. But now the stark dignity of the entrance. Still, the profound change has come upon them. Rooted, they grip down and begin to awaken. This next poem is very loosely about spring, I guess. It's more about change and maybe growth, maybe. Drifters by Bruce Daw. One day soon, he'll tell her that it's time to start packing, and the kids will yell, "Truly?" and get wildly excited for no reason, and the brown kleppy puppy will start dashing about, tripping everyone up, and she'll go out to the vegetable patch and pick all the green tomatoes from the vines, and notice how the oldest girl is close to tears because she was happy here, and how the youngest girl is beaming because she wasn't. And the first thing she'll put on the trailer will be the bottling set she never unpacked from Grovedale. And when the loaded ute bumps down the drive past the blackberry canes with their last shriveled fruit, she won't even ask why they're leaving this time or where they're headed for. She'll only remember how, when they came here, she held out her hands bright with berries, the first of the season, and said, "Make a wish, Tom, make a wish."
It's that time of year when the cardinals, in their chatter, remind me of what's to come. Our current poet laureate, Joy Harjo, has a worldview informed by her Native American heritage. A bit of that shines through here. The poem is called Redbird Love by Joy Harjo. We watched her grow up. She was the urgent chirper, fledgling flyer. And when spring rolled out its green, she'd grown into the most noticeable bird girl, long-legged and just the right amount of blush tipping her wings, crest and tail, and she knew it in the bird parade. We watched her strut She owned her stuff. The males perked their armor, greased their wings, and flew skyloop missions to show off for her. In the end, there was only one. Isn't that how it is for all of us? There's that one you circle back to for home. This morning, the young couple scavenges seeds on the patio. She is thickening with eggs. Their minds are busy with sticks the perfect size, tufts of fluff like dandelion, and other pieces of soft. He steps aside for her so she can eat. Then we watch him fill his beak, walk tenderly to her, and kiss her with a seed. The sacred world lifts up its head to notice. We are double, triple blessed. I wanted to find someone new for me to read this morning. Amy Gersler came along. She actually has at least 10 books of poetry and has a different perspective from much of what I read or know. She's a fresh voice for me. The poem is called In Perpetual Spring by Amy Gersler. Gardens are also good places to sulk. You pass beds of spiky voodoo lilies and trip over the roots of a sweet gum tree in search of medieval plants whose leaves, when they drop off, turn into birds if they fall on land, and colored carp if they plop into water. Suddenly, the archetypal human desire for peace with every other species wells up in you. The lion and the lamb cuddling up, the snake and the snail kissing. Even the prick of the thistle, queen of the weeds, revives your secret belief in perpetual spring. Your faith that for every hurt, there is a leaf to cure it.
And in the tradition of the poetry service, we've long had arguments about whether songs can be poems. And I've always fallen on the yes side of that, and Mike and I are both obsessed with Joni Mitchell. So here's Joni Mitchell. Born with the moon in Cancer, choose her a name she'll answer to. Call her green, and the winters cannot fade her. Call her green for the children who have made her. Little green, be a gypsy dancer. He went to California, hearing that everything's warmer there. So you write him a letter, say, her eyes are blue. He sends you a poem, and she's lost to you. Little green, he's a nonconformer. Just a little green, like the color when spring is born. There'll be crocuses to bring to school tomorrow, just a little green. Like the nights when the northern lights perform, there'll be icicles and birthday clothes, and sometimes there'll be sorrow. Child, with a child pretending, weary of lies you are sending home, so you sign all the papers in the family name. You're sad and you're sorry, but you're not ashamed. Little green, have a happy ending. Just a little green, like the color when the spring is born. There'll be crocuses to bring to school tomorrow. Just a little green, like the nights when the northern lights perform. There'll be icicles and birthday clothes, and sometimes there'll be sorrow. And the last poem is a very religious poem. It's by Ross Gay. Pretty much says it all, I think. Ross Gay is a poet at Indiana University. Today, as the season of bloom truly begins, its retreat in the form of a neighbor lady cutting back her lilies, and the anxious look of crickets, and the lull between certain bird song, I am praising the snake in its silvery tongue. I am praising Eve and Adam, their hunger, and wondering the explosion's million colors. Heartbreak, yes, and a father's cold shoulder, but what secrets touch as the boundless paths unfold and the cold took hold? What then of God? Did Crave still have his name? Or did the hand that drew the two from the dust loosen its grip as they studied the taste of each other's mouths, as their own hands made the first human cries beneath that night? And when that song touched their God, didn't he smile and caress the slithering thing in his lap, both of them proud of their children's first steps?